His young daughter vanished at a carnival. Having left her out of sight for no more than a short moment, she wandered off and disappeared. But 14 years later, the father sees a poster on a pole, and what he sees on it makes his blood run cold. The train pulled into Crestwood, Oregon, with a prolonged screech that made Evan Blake wheeze. He'd been travelling for hours and the fatigue was starting to weigh on him, but the excitement of what awaited pushed it aside. At 38, Evan had spent far too many years alone, trapped in the prison of his memories and regrets. As he stepped off the train suitcase in one hand, he used his free hand to check his phone. The screen displayed a photo of a woman with warm brown eyes and a gentle smile that had become his favourite sight over the past year. Samantha Miller. Sam, as he called her, had become his lifeline without even knowing it. Evans scanned the bustling station, searching for her face among the crowd. They'd been talking online for nearly a year, now their relationship growing from cautious messages to nightly video calls. When he finally proposed meeting in person, her yes had felt like permission to hope again. For 14 years, hope had been in short supply. 14 years since his 5-year-old daughter Leia disappeared at a travelling carnival while he was distracted. 14 years of dead-end leads, police investigations that went nowhere, and eventually a case gone cold. The guilt had nearly destroyed him. But at almost 40, Evan had finally accepted that he needed to get a grip on his life. The depression had only deepened with time, and he was stuck in a past he couldn't change. Taking that leap to meet new people online had been terrifying, but finding Sam had made it worthwhile. Evan. A touch on his shoulder made him turn around. There she was, Sam looking exactly like her photos, but somehow more real, more vibrant. Beside her stood a boy, with her same brown eyes and unruly dark hair, Luke, her 8-year-old son. Evan had heard all about him during their late-night conversations. Sam, he said, a smile stretching across his face. It's really you. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, in a hug that felt both new and familiar at once. Welcome to Crestwood. Hi, Luke said, offering a small wave. Mum showed me your pictures. You look taller in real life. Evan laughed, the tension in his shoulders easing. And you look exactly like your mum described you. Smart and cool. I brought my Switch, Mum said. Maybe you could play Mario Kart with me later. I'd like that, Evan replied, surprised by how natural it felt to talk to the child. Sam smiled at their interaction, before nodding toward the exit. My car is parked just outside. Let's get you settled. As they walked through the station, there was an initial awkwardness between them, the natural result of shifting from digital to physical space. But underneath it was a sense of familiarity that made Evan feel like they'd known each other forever. Luke climbed into the back seat while Sam slid behind the wheel. Evan took the passenger seat, his suitcase now in the trunk. How was the journey? Sam asked as she pulled out of the parking lot. Long, Evan admitted, but worth it. I can't believe we're finally meeting in person. She smiled, keeping her eyes on the road. I was so nervous this morning. Luke had to tell me to calm down. Mum changed her outfit like 4 times. Luke chimed in from the back. Sam laughed, shooting her son a playful glare through the rearview mirror. Thanks for that, buddy. Are you tired? She asked Evan. We can head straight to your apartment if you want to rest. Evan shook his head. Not tired at all. I'd love to see Crestwood. Show me around. I have somewhere special in mind for your first stop, Sam, said, a hint of mystery in her voice. Don't worry about your luggage or checking in just yet. Where are we going? Evan asked, curious. It's a surprise, she replied with a smile. She drove them to the edge of town, where the suburban landscape gradually gave way to more open spaces. Eventually, they turned into a semi-rural park with sprawling green fields and massive oak trees dotting the landscape. This is a good start to my week in Crestwood, Evan said as they parked and stepped out into the crisp autumn air. Welcome to Hollow Creek Park, Sam explained. It's known for those ancient oak trees and the shallow stream that winds along the northern edge. It's my favourite place in town. They began walking along one of the park's winding paths, Evan and Sam making small talk while Luke ran ahead occasionally, doubling back to show them something interesting he'd found. Mom, Luke suddenly called out, pointing to a colourful poster attached to a lamppost. "Look, there's a circus." They stopped by the poster, which advertised Draven's Mystique Circus, in bold dramatic lettering. The vibrant image showed performers' animals and the iconic red and white striped tent. "It must be in East Meadow," Sam noted. "That's the section of the park where they hold the seasonal events and town festivals." Evan smiled, but Sam noticed the subtle change in his expression, a tightening around his eyes, a momentary stiffness in his shoulders. She knew his history from their long conversations, how he'd lost his daughter at a carnival similar to this. "We don't have to go," she said quietly, touching his arm. "We can do something else." But Evan saw the excitement in Luke's eyes, the way he was studying the poster with wonder, and he couldn't bring himself to disappoint the boy. "It's okay. We could check it out, though. The poster doesn't mention the showtime. Maybe we should look into it later, only if you're sure," Sam insisted, studying his face. "Yes, I'm sure," Evan nodded. "Why not?" Luke, determined not to lose the opportunity, carefully removed the poster from the pole. "Can I keep this, please?" "Sure, buddy," Sam laughed. "Just don't litter." They continued their walk through the park, the atmosphere relaxed and pleasant. Evan found himself reflecting on how different his life could be with Sam and Luke in it. She understood what it meant to be a parent, could relate to his emotional burdens in a way others couldn't. Her presence encouraged him to focus on the future rather than the past. A sudden gust of wind caught the poster in Luke's hand, nearly ripping it away. Evan quickly reached out and caught it before it could blow away. As he grabbed it, his eyes fell on the image again, and this time, something made his heart skip a beat. The memories flooded back. Evan had been just 19 when his high school girlfriend Rachel got pregnant. After giving birth to Laya, Rachel had found herself overwhelmed by the sudden responsibility and left unable to cope with motherhood at such a young age. Evan had struggled to raise his daughter alone, working multiple jobs while studying nursing. Then at 24, during a rare day off, he'd taken 5-year-old Laya to a travelling carnival with some friends. He'd only looked away for 5 minutes, just 5 minutes, to help a friend win a carnival game. And she was gone. The search had been extensive, the investigations thorough, but Laya had simply vanished without a trace. Evan carefully folded the poster and slipped it into his jacket pocket, forcing himself to smile at Sam and Luke. As they wandered through the park, the circus tent became increasingly visible in the distance. The bright red and white stripes stood out against the green landscape, while colourful banners and posters led the way toward East Meadow. Without discussing it, their steps gravitated in that direction, Luke's excitement pulling them forward. "Can we check it out, Mum? Please," Luke begged, tugging on Sam's sleeve. Sam glanced at Evan, who nodded with a small smile. "I don't see why not. We're already here." They approached the information booth set up at the entrance to the meadow, where a young woman with glitter on her cheeks handed them a glossy booklet. 8. "We're thinking about attending the show," Sam explained. "Are there still tickets available for today?" The woman checked her tablet and shook her head. "I'm sorry. We're completely booked for today's performances, but we have slots available for tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. I'd recommend arriving early, though. There are other carnival activities and games that open before the main show." Luke turned to his mother with pleading eyes. "Can we come tomorrow, Mum? Please? I don't see why not," Sam replied, looking at Evan. "What do you think? It could be fun?" Evan was only half listening. He had opened the booklet and was studying a larger version of the poster, which showed the performers more clearly. His attention was fixed on one performer, in particular, a woman wearing a classic red top hat and tailored red vest with black high-waisted shorts and knee-high boots. Her long, wavy blonde hair cascaded down her shoulders, partially covering her right arm. But what caught Heaven's eye wasn't her costume or her striking pose with a tiger. It was a small distinctive birthmark on her right arm, a mark that looked identical in pattern to his daughter's, though Laya's had been on her left arm. As he stared more intently, he noticed her eyes the same vibrant blue that Laya had inherited from him. His hands trembled slightly as he held the booklet closer. "Is this woman one of the performers?" Evan asked the staff member, pointing to the blonde in the red vest. The woman nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, that's Aria. She's one of our star performers. Absolutely incredible with the tigers. You shouldn't miss her act. Draven's Mystique Circus only comes through once a year. They're based in Brisbane, Australia, and they've toured across Asia, Europe, and North America. We're lucky to have them." Her birthmark, Evan said, pointing to the mark on the woman's arm. "It's quite distinctive." The staff member gave him a puzzled look, clearly finding his interest in the birthmark strange. "Oh, that it's actually on her left arm in real life. The image in the poster is mirrored, but I'm pretty sure it's on her left." Evan's heart pounded in his chest. A birthmark on the left arm, just like Laya's. Without hesitating, he pulled out his wallet and handed over his credit card. 3 front-row tickets for tomorrow's show, please," Sam exclaimed, reaching for her own wallet. "Let me pay for Luke and me." "That's too much." "No, it's on me," Evan insisted, already entering his PIN. "Consider it a thank you for showing me around." The staff member processed the payment and handed over their tickets. "You're all set for tomorrow at 10:30. Feel free to explore the carnival grounds in the meantime. Some of the game stalls are already open today." As they stepped away from the booth, Sam attempted to reimburse Evan for the tickets, but he quickly changed the subject, showing her the booklet. "See this performer in the red vest," he said, pointing to the image. "She has the same birthmark as my daughter, in the exact same spot, though it looks faded now. That's why I got front row seats. I need to get a closer look at her." Sam's expression softened with understanding. "Oh, Evan, I know it sounds crazy," he admitted, "but the birthmark, the blue eyes. I have to check." They tried to explore the carnival, but the crowds had grown thicker, and the lines for games and food stalls stretched longer than Luke's patience could endure. Eventually, they decided to return the next day, when they would have more time before the main show. By the time they finished their tour of the park, the sun had begun to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. "It's getting late," Sam observed, glancing at Luke, who was trying and failing to stifle a yawn. "We should probably head back. I don't need to go to bed early." "There's no school tomorrow," Luke protested. "I'm a big kid now." Sam ruffled his hair. "Big kids need rest too, buddy." They drove back toward town, stopping first at a diner for their early dinner, then made it to Evan's rental apartment. The small furnished one-bedroom was just a few blocks from Sam's house, close enough for convenience during his week-long stay, but not so close as to presume too much about their relationship. "I'll pick you up around 9:30 tomorrow," Sam suggested, as Evan climbed out of the car. "That'll give us time to get to the circus early." "Sounds perfect," Evan agreed, leaning down to wave at Luke. "See you tomorrow, buddy." "Bye, Evan," Luke called. Evan quickly checked into his apartment, thanking the property manager who had waited for his arrival. Once inside, he tossed his suitcase onto the bed and collapsed onto the couch, pulling out the circus booklet again. His heart thumped in his chest as he stared at the image of Aria. Could it really be possible? His mind raced with possibilities and questions. If this woman was Leia, how had she ended up with the circus? Had she been taken, or had someone found her wandering and brought her into the troupe? Evan remembered the frantic search 14 years ago. The circus staff and performers had been questioned, but no one had seen Leela. Police had searched every trailer, every tent, every vehicle, but found nothing. It wasn't the first time that particular circus had been investigated either. There had been other reports of missing children following their performances, but with the troupe constantly moving across international borders, coordination between law enforcement agencies had been a nightmare. Eventually, with no proof of abduction or staff involvement, the case had gone cold. This Circus Draven's Mystique was different from the one where Laya had disappeared, though both were Australian companies. Perhaps someone had found Laya, and she'd eventually joined this new troupe. It seemed far-fetched, but Evan couldn't ignore the similarities. He opened his phone gallery and scrolled through old photos until he found the last picture he'd taken of Laya. She was holding a blue cotton candy, her tongue sticking out to show him how it had turned blue. Her short blonde hair was free-flowing, and her blue eyes, his eyes sparkled with childish delight. The birthmark on her left arm was partially visible where her sleeve had ridden up. Evan smiled at the photo, as he always did. Then he set an alarm for the morning, prepared for bed, and tried to quiet his racing mind enough to sleep. Tomorrow he would get answers one way or another. Morning arrived with soft sunlight filtering through the curtains of Evan's rental apartment. He had been awake for hours, unable to sleep through the night, with his mind churning over possibilities. He showered, dressed, and was waiting by the door when his phone buzzed with a text from Sam announcing her arrival. When he stepped outside, Sam was already parked at the curb, Luke in the back seat. Evan slid into the passenger seat, greeted by Sam's warm smile. "Good morning," she said. "You look like you didn't get much sleep." "Is it that obvious?" Evan laughed, running a hand through his hair. "Only to someone who spent a year getting to know your face through video calls," she replied. Sam drove them back to Hollow Creek Park. The East Meadow area was considerably less crowded than the previous evening, with only a handful of early visitors milling around the carnival games and food stalls. Luke was immediately drawn to a ring toss game, but Sam noticed Evan's gaze fixed on the main circus tent in the distance. "You're looking for her, aren't you?" Sam asked gently. Evan nodded. "I'm sorry. I know it sounds ridiculous. The chances that this woman is actually Liar are well astronomically small, but I need to know for sure." Sam squeezed his hand. "It's not ridiculous at all. If you want to look around the tent before the show, go ahead. Luke and I will stay here. He's already eyeing that cotton candy stand." "Thank you for understanding," Evan said, grateful for her support. "I'll keep my phone with me. Call if you need anything." "Take your time," Sam assured him. "We'll be fine." Evan made his way toward the main circus tent, its red and white stripes vibrant against the clear blue sky. As he approached, he noticed a staff member standing guard at the entrance, preventing early access. "Excuse me," Evan said. "I was wondering when the tent opens for today's show." "Not for another hour and a half," the man replied. "The grounds are open for you to enjoy the carnival games and food stalls in the meantime." Evan hesitated before asking, "Would it be possible to meet with one of the performers, Aria specifically? I saw her in the promotional materials and I think we might have met before." The staff member shook his head firmly. "I'm sorry, sir, but that's not possible. Aria is preparing for the show and cannot be disturbed. All performers need their focus before a performance. If you want to reach her, you can wait until after the show, when some performers sometimes greet the audience." Disappointed but not surprised, Evan turned to head back towards Sam and Luke, his thoughts already spinning with ways he might steal a moment alone with Aria. As he walked away, movement caught his eye. Another staff member was rushing across the grounds, carrying what appeared to be a first aid kit. The man moved with urgency, heading toward a smaller tent set up behind the main one. Evan's nursing instincts kicked in, and his curiosity piqued. He changed direction, following the man at a distance. As a healthcare professional, he was naturally drawn to emergencies, and something about the situation felt important. As he approached the smaller tent, the staff member with the first aid kit noticed him and stopped abruptly. "Sir, this area is restricted," the man said firmly. "Guests need to remain in the public areas." Evan quickly pulled out his nursing license from his wallet. "I'm a registered nurse. I saw you rushing with a medical kit and thought I might be able to help." The man's expression immediately changed from suspicion to relief. "Thank God," he exclaimed. "Please follow me. We have a situation." Evan followed the staff member into the tent, which was clearly set up as a makeshift medical station. Equipment was neatly organized on portable tables, and a stretcher sat in the center of the space. Lying on the stretcher was a young woman in a sparkling blue performance costume, her face contorted in pain as she clutched her ankle. Immediately, Evan recognized her as one of the performers from the poster. Not Aria, but the other female star, whose image had been next to the tiger trainer. "What happened?" Evan asked, slipping effortlessly into his professional role. Alina sprained her ankle during the morning rehearsal with the tiger, the staff member explained, setting down the first aid kit. The tiger didn't hurt her. She just landed wrong during a movement sequence. Let me take a look, Evan said, approaching the stretcher. Before he could reach her, a tall, imposing man entered the tent. He wore an elaborate rings costume, a dark blue tailcoat with red accents, a matching vest and black trousers. His head was completely bald, and his thick moustache seemed to accentuate his stern expression. "What's going on here?" the man demanded, his voice carrying the hint of an Australian accent. "This gentleman is a nurse," the staff member explained quickly. "He offered to help with Alina's injury." The man's expression softened slightly. "Thank you for your assistance. I'm afraid Alina can't perform with a sprained ankle, even though she's one of our star performers." "Yes, Father," Alina replied, her voice tinged with disappointment. Evan found it strange that she called him father, wondering if they were actually related or if it was some kind of circus familial term. He knelt beside Alina and gently examined her ankle, noting the swelling. "It's definitely a sprain," Evan confirmed. "Not severe, but she needs to stay off it for a few days at minimum." He reached for the first aid kit and pulled out an ice pack, activating it and carefully applying it to her ankle. Rice protocol: rest, ice compression, and elevation. "I'll wrap it properly once the swelling goes down a bit." The ringmaster paced the tent, clearly distressed. "We'll need to replace her role with someone else. Get the makeup artist to make the replacement look as much like her as possible." He turned to Evan, suddenly studying his face with an intensity that made Evan uncomfortable. "You look familiar." "Have we met before?" "I don't think so," Evan replied, focusing on treating Alina's ankle. "I'm not from Oregon, just visiting." "Your name?" the man asked. "Evan Blake," he answered, not thinking much of it. The ringmaster's expression changed instantly. A flash of recognition followed by what looked like alarm. Without another word, he turned and quickly left the tent, calling over his shoulder. "Continue caring for Alina. I have matters to attend to." "What's his name?" Evan asked the remaining staff member, finding the ringmaster's reaction strange. "That's Robert Draven," the man replied. "He owns the circus." Evan continued treating Alina's ankle, applying proper compression and elevating it with a folded blanket. As he worked, the tent flap opened again and a new figure entered. Evan looked up and his heart nearly stopped. Standing before him was the woman from the poster, Aria. Her long blonde hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, revealing more of her face than the promotional images had shown. She wore a simple training outfit rather than her performance costume, but Evan would have recognized her anywhere. Her eyes, Liar's eyes, met his briefly before she turned her attention to Alina. "What happened?" she asked, her voice carrying no hint of recognition, toward Evan. "Sprained ankle during rehearsal," Alina explained. "This nurse is helping." Aria finally turned her full attention to Evan, noticing his intense stare. "What are you looking at?" she asked directly, her hand moving to cover the birthmark on her left arm, the exact spot where Liar's had been. Caught off guard by her directness, Evan stumbled over his words. "I'm sorry, I couldn't help but notice your birthmark. My daughter has one in the exact same spot." Aria's expression softened slightly with interest. "What's your daughter's name?" Liar Evan said, watching her face carefully for any sign of recognition. "That's a beautiful name," Aria replied, casually, showing no indication that the name meant anything to her. If this woman was truly his daughter, surely she would have reacted to her own name, even if she now went by a stage name. Disappointment settled in Evan's chest. It seemed this was just an extraordinary coincidence. The same birthmark, the same blue eyes, but not his Liar. He finished treating Alina's ankle, providing instructions for her care over the next few days. "Keep it elevated, as much as possible ice it regularly, and try to stay off it completely for at least 48 hours. "Thank you," Elena said sincerely. "I'm so disappointed in myself. This is our first circus performance in the US after 10 years, and I've already let everyone down." 10 years, Evan repeated, something clicking in his mind. "Yes," Elena confirmed. "The last time we performed here, I was just 12 years old, and the company had a different name. There were so many police officers around. They were investigating some case. Since then, we've toured South America, Asia, Europe, and Australia, but never North America until now. A chill ran down Evan's spine as he remembered something he discovered during his desperate search for Laia. About 10 years ago, he'd stumbled upon an online thread suggesting that children had disappeared following performances by a particular circus company. He'd reported it to the police, but they'd told him they couldn't prove any involvement. There was simply no evidence. All the staff had proper documentation, and minors travelling with the troupe had parental consent forms. "Thank you again for your help," Alina said, interrupting his thoughts. She reached into a small bag beside her and pulled out a trinket, a miniature brass binocular on a keychain. "Here, take this. It might help you see the show better from your seat later." "That's very kind," Evan said, accepting the gift with a smile. The staff member who had initially brought him to the tent appeared at his side. "I'll escort you back to the public area now, sir. Thank you for your assistance." As Evan was led out of the medical tent, his mind raced with new possibilities. The coincidences were piling up. The birthmark, the eyes, the circus's absence from North America following police investigations. Robert Draven's strange reaction to his name. Something wasn't right. He scanned the grounds for Sam and Luke, but didn't see them immediately. Checking his phone, he found a message from Sam. "We're in line. Luke wanted cotton candy. Join us when you're done." Evan hurried across the grounds, navigating through the growing crowd, until he spotted Sam and Luke in the line. Luke's face was partially blue from the cotton candy he was devouring, reminding Evan painfully of that last photo of Laia. "There you are," Sam said as he approached. "We were starting to worry." "Everything okay? Sorry for disappearing," Evan explained, catching his breath. "One of the performers had an accident, a sprained ankle. I ended up helping out." Always the nurse, Sam smiled. "Luke, slow down with that cotton candy. You'll get a sugar rush before the show even starts." "I'm savouring it," Luke protested, taking another enormous bite that contradicted his statement. As they reached the front of the line, a staff member checked their tickets and directed them toward the main entrance of the tent. "Front row seats. Lucky you. The show will begin in 10 minutes. Inside the tent was even more impressive than it had appeared from the outside. Tiered seating surrounded a circular performance ring with spotlights hanging from the centre pole. The air smelled of popcorn, sawdust, and excitement. They found their seats, easily premium spots right at the edge of the ring. As they settled in, Evan pulled out the miniature binoculars Alina had given him. "Where did you get those?" Luke asked, immediately interested. "The performer I helped gave them to me as a thank you," Evan explained, showing them to Luke. "Pretty cool, right? Can I try?" Luke asked eagerly. "Sure." Evan handed them over, watching, as Luke immediately put them to his eyes and began scanning the tent. Evan leaned closer to Sam, speaking quietly. "I met the woman in red from the poster, Arya, in the medical tent," and Sam asked, her expression concerned. "She's not Laia," Evan admitted, the disappointment evident in his voice. "She didn't recognize the name at all. My daughter was 5 when she was taken. She knew her name." Sam reached over and took his hand, squeezing it gently. "I'm sorry, Evan." "It's okay," he said, leaning his head against hers briefly. "At least now I know." Sam rested her head on his shoulder, a comforting gesture that made Evan realize how right this felt being here. With her starting to build something new, perhaps it was finally time to move forward, to accept that Laia might never be found, and to focus on the future that could be his with Sam and Luke. The lights dimmed and a drum roll announced the beginning of the show. Robert Draven stepped into the centre ring, his ringmaster's outfit gleaming under the spotlights. "Ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages," he announced in a booming voice, "welcome to Draven's Mystique Circus, where the impossible becomes possible and dreams come to life before your very eyes." As Draven continued his introduction, his eyes scanned the audience, and for a brief moment they locked with Evan's. The ringmaster seemed to falter, stumbling over his words before quickly recovering and moving on with his speech. "Can I see the binoculars again?" Evan asked Luke, who reluctantly handed them over. He trained them on Draven, but the man had already moved to the side of the ring, introducing the first act. Something about the ringmaster's reaction bothered Evan. He pulled out his phone and quickly searched for information about Draven's Mystique Circus. Several articles appeared, and he skimmed through them quickly. One caught his attention, a piece about the circus changing ownership 10 years ago. He clicked on it and saw a photo of the previous circus leader, Victor Cohen, alongside an early picture of Robert Draven at the ownership transition. The article explained that Cohen had stepped down and sold the circus to Draven, resulting in the name change. But as Evans studied the photos more carefully, he noticed similarities between the two men that went beyond coincidence. Their body language and gestures in the photos were nearly identical, and there was something about their facial structure that seemed similar despite obvious differences. Scrolling through more images, Evan finally noticed something definitive. Both men wore the same distinctive ring with a green stone. It was visible in every photo of both Cohen and Venn, always on the same finger. "It can't be a coincidence," Evan murmured to himself. Why would two different circus owners wear the exact same, one-of-a-kind ring? Was it something passed down from Cohen to Draven when he bought the company? Sam nudged him gently. "You're missing the show," she whispered, nodding toward the ring where acrobats were performing incredible feats. "Sorry," Evan replied, trying to focus on the performers. "Just got distracted." As the show progressed through various acts, Evan's anticipation grew. According to the program, Aria's Tiger Act would be the finale before intermission. Finally, the announcer's voice boomed through the tent. "And now, ladies and gentlemen, prepare to be amazed by the fearless Aria and her magnificent Bengal Tiger Raja." The spotlight swung to the entrance as dramatic music filled the air. A woman in Aria's distinctive red costume entered the ring, leading a massive tiger on a decorative chain. "Can I see those again?" Evan asked Luke, who had reclaimed the binoculars. Luke passed them over, and Evan focused on the performer. Through the magnified view, he could see something was off. This wasn't the same Aria he'd met in the medical tent. The makeup and costume were identical, but subtle differences in her movements and facial structure were apparent to someone who had been studying her image so intently. "That's not her," Evan whispered to Sam. "What do you mean?" Sam asked, confused. "The woman performing as Aria, it's not the same person I met earlier." "They've switched performers." Sam squinted at the ring. "You're right," she said after a moment. "Look at the poster in the program, and then at her. The makeup is similar, but it's definitely not the same person." She paused, thinking. "And look, Robert isn't handling the tiger either, unlike what's shown in the booklet." A growing uneasiness settled in Evan's stomach. Why would they switch Aria when it was Alina who had been injured? And where was Robert Draven, who, according to the promotional materials, should have been part of this act? "I need to check something," Evan said, standing abruptly. "I'll be right back." "Evan, what's going on?" Sam asked, concern evident in her voice. "I'm not sure yet," he replied. "Just trust me, okay? I'll be back soon." Without waiting for a response, Evan slipped out of his seat and headed for the exit, the sound of applause fading behind him. Outside the main tent, Evan moved with purpose toward the performers' area. He spotted a staff member directing people and approached him confidently. "Excuse me, I need to get to the crew tent," Evan said. "It's important." The young man shook his head. "I'm sorry, sir, but that area is restricted to circus personnel only. You'll need to return to the main show." Evan pulled out his nursing license again. "I'm the nurse who treated Elena's sprained ankle earlier. I need to check on her condition." The staff member hesitated before nodding. "Right, I heard about you. Follow me, but please don't wander around unescorted." He led Evan to a large tent behind the main performance space and gestured inside. "The medical area is toward the back. Please go directly there." Evan thanked him and entered the crew tent, which bustled with activity. Costume racks lined one wall, and makeup stations were set up along another. Staff members rushed about preparing for costume changes and upcoming acts, barely noticing him. Evan scanned the space for Alina or Aria, but saw neither. He approached a makeup artist who was organising brushes at one of the stations. "Excuse me, I'm looking for Alina. I treated her ankle earlier and wanted to check on her." The makeup artist looked up, brushing glitter from his hands. "Alina, she's not here. She left with Robert and Aria about 20 minutes ago. Seemed pretty urgent." "Did they say where they were going?" Evan asked, trying to keep his voice casual. "No, but they were in a hurry." "Robert seemed tense," the makeup artist replied. "More than usual. He's always wound tight before performances, you know, right? But this was different." Then the woman looked up. "By the way, who are you, thanks?" Evan said, turning to leave. As he stepped outside the tent, he pulled out his phone and texted Sam. "Something's wrong. Aria and Alina are missing along with Robert. I'm going to look for them." He had barely put his phone away when it buzzed with the reply. "Luke and I are coming to help." "Where are you?" "Outside the crew tent," Evan typed back quickly. "Wait for me at the cotton candy stand." Within minutes, Sam appeared with Luke in tow, the boy looking both confused by the unexpected adventure. "What's going on?" Sam asked, keeping her voice low. "The show's not end yet." Evan quickly explained what he'd learned. Robert, Aria, and Alina left together just before the show started. The timing can't be a coincidence. It happened right after Robert saw me in the audience. Where would they go? Sam wondered, looking around at the crowded carnival grounds. I'm not sure, Evan admitted, but they must still be on the property somewhere. They couldn't have left without being noticed. Sam thought for a moment. If they're trying to avoid being seen, they'd go somewhere quiet, away from the crowds. She pointed north. The stream area is pretty secluded, especially with everyone at the show now. That makes sense, Evan agreed. Let's check there first. They made their way north, leaving the noise and crowds of East Meadow behind. As they approached the area near the shallow stream that ran through Hollow Creek Park, the sounds of the carnival faded, replaced by the gentle babbling of water and rustling leaves. "Luke, stay close," Sam warned, taking her son's hand. "And keep quiet." "Okay." Luke nodded solemnly, sensing the seriousness of the situation. They moved carefully through the trees, even in the lead. As they neared a large oak tree with sprawling branches that resembled octopus tentacles, they heard voices. Evan signalled for Sam and Luke to stop gesturing for them to take cover behind some bushes. "Stay here," he whispered to Sam. "Keep Luke safe." "I'll handle this." "Be careful," Sam whispered back, her eyes filled with concern. Evan moved forward slowly, keeping low and using the trees for cover. As he approached the massive oak, he could see 3 figures beneath it. Robert standing while Alina and Aria sat on folding chairs facing him, their backs to Evan. Robert was speaking softly, his hands moving in flowing patterns before the women's faces. From his position, Evan couldn't make out the words, but the cadence was rhythmic, almost hypnotic. Aria and Alina sat completely still, their postures unnaturally rigid as they stared up at Robert. Evan recognized what he was seeing. Robert was using hypnotic suggestion on the women. The realization sent a chill down his spine. Taking a deep breath, he stepped out from behind the tree and approached Robert directly. "That's enough," Evan called out firmly. Robert's head snapped up his hands, freezing mid-motion. He quickly stepped away from the women, who remained eerily motionless in their chairs, staring vacantly at the space Robert had occupied. "Mr. Blake," Robert said, his voice carefully controlled. "You should be enjoying the show with the rest of the audience." "I know who you are," Evan said, moving closer with measured steps. "Robert Draven is just a disguise. You're Victor Cohen." Robert's face remained impassive. "I don't know what you're talking about. I bought the circus from Victor years ago. Many people in the industry know that." "The plastic surgery is good." Evan continued, circling slightly to position himself between Robert and the women. "But there are things surgery can't change. The freckles on your bald head, your bone structure, the way you move, and that ring with the green stone. You never take it off, do you? Not even when you became someone else." Robert's composure cracked slightly, a flash of anger crossing his face before he masked it with a mocking smile. "You're delusional, Mr. Blake. Perhaps grief has affected your judgment more than you realize." What really gave you away was your own nervousness, Evan said. The way you reacted when you heard my name. How quickly you left the medical tent. You recognized me immediately, didn't you? Robert's facade finally crumbled his expression, turning cold and unyielding. Evan Blake, he said, his Australian accent sharpening with each word. Of course I remember you. I figured after 14 years you'd have let go of the hunt for your daughter. Even the police gave up after 8. I was careful, changed locations, kept low, but here you are, still right on my heels. A mix of vindication and rage surged through Evan. You should have spent your money on aesthetic surgery for my daughter instead of yourself, if you wanted to hide her. Shows what kind of greedy man you really are. What was her name again? Liar, Robert said, his voice disturbingly calm. Yeah, I took her. She wandered into the tiger enclosure 14 years ago, alone crying, calling out for her dad, while you were off playing carnival games with your frat boy buddies. You never deserved her. Evan fought to maintain his composure, even as Robert's words cut into old wounds. So you stole her, a 5-year-old child. I saved her, Robert corrected, his eyes gleaming with a disturbing conviction. Children left in chaos often grow wild. I simply gave her a place to belong. He gestured toward Arya, who remained motionless in her chair. Look at her now, poised, talented, beautiful. I gave her a purpose, a family. You brainwashed her, Evan countered, noting how Arya and Alina remained unnaturally still, clearly under some form of hypnotic influence. You stole her identity and replaced it with whatever suited your needs. Robert stepped closer, his voice dropping to a confidential tone. I'm offering you a deal, Mr. Blake. Leave now, and she'll never know what she lost. Stay, and you risk breaking the only world she's ever known. He spread his hands. She may reject you, and the truth may ruin her. Is that what you want? Evan felt torn between rage and fear. This man had stolen 14 years of his daughter's life, and Liar's life with him. But Robert was right about one thing. The truth could devastate her. The realization that her entire life had been built on lies, that her father was actually her kidnapper. It would be traumatic beyond measure. But then Evan considered what he'd witnessed. Robert had gone to extraordinary lengths right now, switching performers, bringing Arya and Alina to this secluded spot to reinforce whatever hypnotic suggestions he'd been using on them. Young children's minds were especially malleable, and if Robert had been using hypnosis on Liar since she was 5, he could have completely reshaped her memory and identity. You're desperate, Evan said, the realization dawning on him. That's why you're here performing hypnotic suggestion during the show. You're scared that my conversation with Arya in the medical tent might have triggered something, a memory, a doubt. You're reinforcing whatever suggestions you've been maintaining all these years. Robert's expression confirmed Evan's theory. There were medical journals documenting how hypnotic suggestions could create false memories that felt entirely real to the subject, especially when reinforced regularly over time. If Robert had been doing this to Liar since childhood, he would have effectively rewritten her entire history. I will never leave Liar again, Evan said firmly. I've been waiting to find her for 14 years. She's not the same child you lost. Robert snapped his composure, cracking further. Lila is gone. Arya is mine. His tone shifted, becoming calculating. But perhaps we can negotiate. I could give you a percentage of her performance earnings. Allow supervised visits if you agree to maintain the suggestions. You could spend weekends with her, perhaps holidays. Evan laughed bitterly. You really are a pitiful, sad man using hypnosis to control people to steal their lives. No deal. Robert's face contorted with rage. With a guttural sound, he lunged at Evan, tackling him to the ground. Though older, Robert was surprisingly strong, his fury lending him additional power as he tried to pin Evan down. They rolled across the grass, each struggling for dominance. Evan managed to block most of Robert's wild punches, his hospital work having kept him in reasonable shape. They continued to struggle, rolling dangerously close to the shallow stream. As they fought, they tumbled down the slight incline toward the water. Robert, now beneath Evan, pushed up with all his strength, flipping them over, but the momentum carried them further than he'd intended. Robert fell backward, his head and upper back striking a large rock protruding from the stream bed. There was a sharp crack, not from Robert's skull but from something else. The pendulum hanging from a chain around his neck had shattered against the rock. Robert lay stunned. The broken pieces of the black and white stones scattered in the shallow water around him. In the distance, sirens wailed, growing progressively louder. Evan pushed himself up, breathing heavily, as he looked down at Robert, who remained conscious but clearly dazed from the impact. Sam appeared at the top of the incline. Luke safely behind her. She held her phone in her hand. "I called the police," she explained. "Are you okay?" Evan nodded, climbing back up the slippery bank. "I'm fine. Did you see what happened?" "Most of it," Sam confirmed. "I recorded some of his confession on my phone too." The sirens grew louder until police cars pulled into the park area, lights flashing. 2 officers approached quickly, assessing the situation. "That's him," Sam said, pointing to Robert, who was now sitting up in the stream, holding his head. "The man who kidnapped Evan's daughter." The officers helped Robert to his feet, reading him his rights, as they guided him up the bank. More police and paramedics arrived, the latter attending to Robert's minor injuries and checking Evan's bruised face. "Sir, I'm Detective Morgan," a plainclothes officer introduced himself to Evan. 49. 10. "Can you explain what happened here?" Evan recounted everything from seeing Aria on the poster to discovering Robert's true identity as Victor Cohen, and finally the confrontation that had just occurred. He explained about Laya's kidnapping 14 years ago and how he had recognized her birthmark in the promotional materials. "Those 2 women," Evan said, pointing to Aria and Alina, who still sat motionless in their chairs, "are victims. The one in red, Aria, her real name is Laya Blake. She's my daughter. She has the same birth arc and eyes as my daughter, who was taken 14 years ago. Robert, or Victor, has been using hypnosis to control her and others for years." Detective Morgan nodded, taking notes. "We've encountered cases where hypnosis was used in criminal enterprises before. The victims often require specialized treatment to recover suppressed memories and rebuild their sense of identity. It can be a long process." A paramedic finished examining Evan's face, applying antiseptic to a small cut on his cheekbone. "You'll have some bruising, but nothing's broken," she informed him. "Thank you," Evan said, his attention still fixed on Aria and Alina, who were now being attended to by other officers. "They need a licensed hypnotherapist to help them recover. Robert has been manipulating their minds for a very long time." "We'll arrange for appropriate care," Detective Morgan assured him. "There are specialists who work with victims of psychological manipulation. Unfortunately, recovery can take years, especially in cases where the manipulation began in childhood." Evan nodded grimly. "I understand. I just want to help her. Help them both." Detective Morgan closed his notebook. "The circus performance should be ending soon. We need to get back to the tent and interview the other staff members. Many of them may also be victims of manipulation, while others could be complicit." "I'll come with you," Evan offered. They made their way back to East Meadow, leaving Aria and Elena at the safe hand of paramedics, who's now in contact with a hypnotherapist. The small procession of police officers, paramedics, Evan, Sam, and Luke, drawing curious stares from carnival attendees. When they reached the main circus tent, the show was just concluding, and the audience was beginning to file out. Detective Morgan and several officers entered the tent, quickly taking control of the situation. They asked the audience to exit in an orderly fashion, while requesting all circus staff to remain behind. Standing at the back of the tent, Evan watched as the detective addressed the assembled circus employees, explaining that Robert Draven had been arrested and was facing multiple charges, including kidnapping, identity fraud, and psychological abuse. Many of the staff members looked genuinely shocked, while others exchanged knowing glances. Evan suspected some had been aware of Robert's methods, but had either been too afraid to speak up or had been victims themselves. Another officer approached Evan. Mr. Blake, I wanted to inform you that Aria and Elena have been transported to the hospital. A psychologist and a hypnotherapist helped bring them out of the trance during a video call with the paramedic team, and they'll be meeting them at the hospital. Thank you, Evan said. I'd like to go to the hospital too, if that's possible. Of course, the officer nodded. Detective Morgan says you're free to go. We'll need you to come to the station tomorrow to make a formal statement, but for now, you should be with your daughter. Sam touched Evan's arm gently. We'll come with you if that's okay. I'd like that, Evan replied gratefully. The hospital corridor was quiet compared to the chaos of the circus grounds. Evan, Sam, and Luke waited outside a private room where a therapist was working with Aria. After an hour, the door opened and a woman in a white coat stepped out. Mr. Blake. I'm Dr. Renee Collins, the clinical psychologist assigned to your daughter's case. She introduced herself, extending her hand. Evan shook it, anxiety evident in his expression. How is she? She's in a relatively stable condition, but disoriented. Dr. Collins explained. The hypnotic hold Robert Draven had over her was strong but not unbreakable. The good news is that she's young and resilient. With proper treatment, she has an excellent chance of recovery. What happens now? Evan asked. We've begun the process of untangling the false memories implanted through hypnosis, Dr. Collins explained. It's delicate work. We need to help her distinguish between reality and suggestion without causing additional trauma. Will she ever remember her life before Remember Me? Evan's voice cracked slightly. Dr. Collins offered a reassuring smile. Early childhood memories are remarkably resilient, even when suppressed. Do you have anything with you that might help trigger authentic memories, photos or personal items from before she was taken? Evan reached into his wallet and pulled out the worn photo of 5-year-old Laya with her blue cotton candy. I've carried this with me every day for 14 years. This is perfect, Dr. Collins said, taking the photo carefully. Visual stimuli from early childhood can be powerful anchors for authentic memories. Would you like to join us? Evan looked back at Sam, who nodded encouragingly. Go, she said softly. We'll be right here. Dr. Collins led Evan into the room where Aria Laya sat on the edge of a hospital bed. She looked up as they entered, her blue eyes, his eyes filled with confusion. Aria, this is Evan Blake, Dr. Collins introduced him gently. And he has something he'd like to show you. Evan approached slowly, holding out the photo. Hi, he said, his voice gentle. I don't know if you remember this day. We were at a county fair near Portland. You insisted on the biggest cotton candy they had, and then you kept sticking out your blue tongue to make me laugh. Aria took the photo, studying it with a furrowed brow. For a long moment she said nothing, just traced her finger over the image of her younger self. I remember, she began hesitantly, her voice barely above a whisper. I remember the blue. It tasted like blueberries, but sweeter. Evan's heart leapt. Yes, exactly. You said it tasted like blueberry clouds. A tear slipped down Aria's cheek as she continued to stare at the photo. There was a Ferris wheel. I was scared to go on it. But you wanted to try, Evan added gently. So I held your hand the whole time, and we counted the cars we could see from the top. 14, she whispered. We counted 14 red cars. Dr. Collins observed the interaction with quiet approval, making notes but not interrupting the delicate process of reconnection. After spending time with Aria, Evan stepped out to give the doctors space to continue their work. In the hallway, Sam and Luke were waiting, Luke now dozing against his mother's shoulder. How did it go? Sam asked softly. She remembered something Evan said, hope evident in his voice despite his exhaustion. A small thing, but it was real. A genuine memory, not something Robert implanted. Sam reached out and took his hand. That's wonderful, Evan. They moved to the waiting area, where Sam gently laid Luke across several chairs to continue sleeping. Evan and Sam sat close together, the day's events settling around them. I know this changes everything, Evan said after a moment of silence. Finding Laya? It's what I've wanted for 14 years. but I don't want to lose what we've started, you and me. Sam smiled gently. Things have changed, but for the better. I'm not going anywhere, Evan. We'll just take it slowly, one day at a time. You're not intimidated by the fact that I have a 19-year-old daughter? Evan asked, a small smile, finally breaking through his exhaustion. I'm dating a much older man than I thought, Sam teased. But I think I can handle it. Luke stirred and sat up, rubbing his eyes. Did you find the lady from the poster? He asked sleepily. Yes, buddy, Evan replied. She's my daughter, and she's going to need a lot of help, but she's going to be okay. Cool, Luke said with the simple acceptance of a child. Can I keep the binoculars? They helped us solve the mystery. Evan laughed, his first genuine laugh since the ordeal began. Yes, you definitely earned them. A police officer approached them, tablet in hand. Mr. Blake, I wanted to update you on Robert Draven's situation. He's being processed now, and the charges include kidnapping, false imprisonment, identity fraud, and psychological abuse. We've also identified several other victims who were under his influence. What about the circus? Evan asked. The company will be investigated thoroughly, the officer explained. Many staff members appear to have been unaware of Draven's criminal activities, while others were subjected to varying degrees of psychological manipulation. What's particularly disturbing is how he managed to stay under the radar for so long. The officer scrolled through his notes. According to our preliminary investigation, Draven maintained an elaborate system of documentation forgery. He created false parental consent forms for the minors in his troop, complete with convincing signatures and notary stamps. For authorities who questioned these documents, he used hypnotic techniques on select staff members, who would then provide false statements corroborating his claims. That's how he avoided detection during previous investigations. Evan realized exactly. The officer confirmed previous attempts to investigate him hit dead ends because the victims themselves refused to testify. They were so deeply programmed that they genuinely believed they were being protected, not exploited. The circus itself was carefully designed to create the illusion of a nurturing, artistic environment, performing arts, training, education, even family celebrations, all to mask what was essentially a trafficking operation. And because they constantly crossed international borders, Evan began, jurisdiction became a nightmare. The officer finished 1 Terl Surah 51. By the time one law enforcement agency built a case, they'd moved to a different country. But that ends now. We're coordinating with Australian authorities to investigate their operations there as well, and with Interpol to track potential victims across all the countries where they've performed. Thank you, Evan said, the full scope of Robert's deception finally becoming clear. After the officer left, Evan leaned back in his chair, the weight of 14 years of searching finally lifting from his shoulders. The road ahead would be long and difficult, helping Laya recover her identity, rebuilding their relationship and processing the trauma they'd both experienced. But for the first time since that terrible day at the carnival, Evan felt hope. Real, substantial hope. Sam's hand found his, their fingers intertwining naturally. With Laya found and Sam beside him, Evan finally saw the future he had been dreaming of. A life moving forward, rather than trapped in the past. We should get some rest, Sam suggested. Tomorrow's going to be another long day. Evan nodded, squeezing her hand. Tomorrow, he agreed.